third Transformation Talk in our Transformation Talk series. Before we get started, in the manner of friends, why don't we join together in some shared silent worship? Join me. Thank you. I'm Michael Gary, and I have the privilege of being the head of school here at Friends Select. And I am in year 7. And for those of you who probably experienced Friends Select before I got here, and probably experienced the spring fair differently than you experience it today, welcome to the transformation. Welcome to the transformation. I want to say that the name transformation is embedded in the strategic plan that I had the privilege, along with my colleagues here at Friends Select, launched 5 years ago, Advanced Friends Select. And we thought that we would call the campaign a transformation campaign because all the ideas that we had, the goals that we had, should we accomplish them, it's going to radically change the school that we know. In the sense that, not that the teaching is going to change, it's going to continue to be deep and rich and relevant. But we do know things have changed, and they change rapidly. So we thought it was appropriate to call it sort of the transformation campaign. For those of you who remember Blauvelt Theater before it was changed, it's a manifestation of the transformation. This building, this room that you're in right now, which we consider our community classroom. Advanced Friends Select Transformation Campaign has to do with physical transformation of the school, i.e. the Parkway building, which we're in right now, the STEAM building, which opened up in August. If you have not had the chance to tour that, please do. And also a project that's coming up possibly. We have to see if we can do it, but we're imagining transforming the back lot so that we can activate the roof to be more than just what you know now as a turf athletic field. I see it as Sky Theater, the possibility of having entertainment up there, with cafe, with rentals, with wedding ceremonies up there. Can you imagine that? And having the skyline as the backdrop? That's the vision I have for it, Sky Theater. We'll see if we can make that come to fruition. But also the transformation has to do with transforming the possibilities of folks having access to this wonderful resource we call Friends Select. There's so many kids who will love to have this opportunity. But in order to make that happen, we all together need to invest even more in the school that we love to make it financially possible for those families. Also, faculty and staff development. We need to keep that going and going strong. That's a part of the transformation as well. Transformation in the ways that others see us and how we see ourselves in this space. As alumni, thank you for coming back. You are very much a part of this idea of transformation, how you see your alma mater as it continues to grow, as it continues to evolve. As Quakers say, continuing revelation. You play a part in it, and we want you to imagine how you fit into that transformation. Today's talk, strategic partnerships. I'll remind you, the Parkway building that we're in now, prior to this, we had a sprawling campus, multiple buildings on this block, all right? And this is what's called the new building in 68. Some alums maybe remember that, the new building, right? But this building would not have happened if the school didn't have a partnership with the company who built the skyscraper there. That's how it came to be. It was being strategic in that regard, a strategic partnership. Expanding our school's footprint in the city is how we see the transformation happening in this current campaign, making connections that benefit the school and our students, and introduce students to the ideas that the expertise that lies beyond our walls will be essential for a lifelong journey of learning. Today, we get a taste of that expertise and what it means for our community. I'm going to introduce Dave Marshall, upper school history teacher, and Julian Jones, a current senior, who will be our moderators today. Please join me and give me a round of applause to all of our participants on stage here for our Transformation Talk Series number 3.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here, both in person and virtually, wherever you are. Once again, my name is Dave Marshall. I teach upper school history. This is my 2nd year here at Friends Select. Feel so lucky to be here. And my 15th year teaching overall.
Yeah, I'm Julian Jones. I'm a junior. I came in 9th grade. This is my 3rd year here.
And Julian has taken the time out of her busy weekend. She just did spin art earlier, and she has a whole lot of US history homework for a certain teacher as well. So thank you. Let's start out. We have about 45 minutes of prepared questions, and then we can open it up to the audience. First question, could you briefly introduce yourselves and then talk about how your work has been influenced by your experience here at Friends Select? And we can just go down the line, starting with Mr. Chin.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. John Chin, class of 1983, and my children are classes of, I forgot already. Well, Matthew graduated after 5 years at Drexel, so we got to go backwards. I think he's class of 2019, and Sydney's probably class of 2016. So we as a family have had a wonderful experience at Friends Select School. Friends Select School has given me the grounding that I need and use every day, mostly, I want personally, but also mostly in the work that I do as Executive Director of the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation. I've been there 23 years. I was born and raised in Chinatown, and I had the good fortune of working in the nonprofit that has been so important in sustaining Chinatown. So, you know, what Michael Gary talked about, transformation, but also having the confidence in leading the work for Chinatowns as a neighborhood, the planning work for Chinatown and serving low-income families in Chinatown. So I'll talk a little bit more about what Friends Select has given me, but it's given me a foundation in the way I interact with people and the confidence, because rather than speak over each other, I've been able to speak with one another. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gerald Lopez. I wish I could say I was an alum of Friends Select. I am the father. I am Alina and Luna's father. Alina is in the 1st grade. Alina is in the 5th grade. Luna is in the 1st grade. And I have a younger one that I think in 2 years will be here. A little bit about myself. I work for the University of Pennsylvania at the Singh Center for Nanotechnology. It is basically this very large building with a cantilever structure sticking out of it on the corner of 33rd and Walnut Street. So you ever seen a house of glass, this jutting structure, that's my building. It is a center for technology research down to the nanoscale. We literally can see atoms where we are. And why is this important? There's various fields that touch our enterprise, and anyone can come in and join us, and to basically in any field. We touch 6 of the 12 schools at the University of Pennsylvania. This includes medicine, obviously the School of Engineering and Applied Science, School of Arts and Sciences, dental, and design. And what we see is just this gamut of producing new medical therapies for people, to producing new materials for energy, new materials for integrated circuits, and really other frontiers that really kind of hits to the edge of imagination, right? When it comes to how I got in touch with friends, it started with a high schooler who went through our summer program, and he walked and took a tour of our nanofab, our clean room. And I made the open request or open invitation that if you're interested in ever to come work here and have an internship, just send me an email. And he did just that. And this young man, in his senior year, decided he wanted to do an internship for his high school 2-week program at the Sing Center. He was the first person that was under 18 that we could take in, and I told him, look, if you want to work on this high-end equipment, you have to come in 3 months in advance. And he did. And when he did, he hit the ground running in those last 2 weeks, presented his work. He went to, I believe he went to RPI, then went to Cornell, and now is working for Apple. And he says, to this day, we still stay in touch. His name is Owen Ding. And to this day, we still stay in touch. He says he would never have gotten into the field without having touched that space. It really did open my eyes as to, at the time my kids were very young, what was possible, what ambitions these kids could have in this city, right? And I think that's important to realize, is that there's so much potential out there. And when I look about what's going on and what's happening at the national level, I'm going to talk about this a little later. For those of you that don't know, there's a large government initiative called the CHIPS and Science Act. It's a $280 billion bill that was passed to onshore chip manufacturing in the US. What does that mean? Well, it means opportunity for everyone. I'm not even talking about liberal arts majors who can do communications and artwork and design. I'm talking about the vets that need jobs, the dropouts that need something, up to the people that want to lead and manage and build enterprises. So when I come in and talk about strategic partnerships, I think the most important principle is to dream big.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm Melissa Levy. I'm the class of 1991. It's not on? I'm not holding it? Okay. How about now? There we go. Hi, Ingrid. It's been forever. So I'm so happy to be back here. It has been forever since I've been back at Friends Select, and I'm really proud to I always reflect on my time here, and my Friends Select is part of me every day. It's something that the foundation that I developed here over 12 years really, I think, just kind of permeates just who I am and how I get to work now. I am the executive director of PAWS, the Philadelphia Animal Welfare Society. We are the largest rescue partner in Philadelphia, and we are also the largest provider of affordable veterinary care. Our goal originally was really kind of animal focused. It was meant to save lives of animals who were just pouring into the city shelter at the time. There was a real crisis in Philadelphia at the time, about 17 years ago when we started. And I think we very quickly realized that our role in this city is to serve a vast number of people who just did not have access to the care that they need in order to keep and care for the pets that they have and that they love. So our core mission has remained the same, but the way that we accomplish it has really evolved dramatically over the years. We started as a volunteer group. We now have 3 locations and 60 staff members, and we serve about 40,000 animals a year. But equally importantly are all of the people who are connected to those animals and who love them and who just need some support sometimes to care for them. So when I think about my grounding at Friends Select, my education and just my experience here, it informs everything that I do and I think what I bring to my work. Fundamentally is what I learned here, which is that kind of driving need to serve our community, to recognize that we are all connected to each other, and that for me, I knew that my work, whatever form it took, needed to be something where I felt like I was contributing and making the lives of my fellow community members better. And I think, that certainly, I didn't know what form it would take. That has revealed itself over the years, but I think that is something that was just so much a part of the experience at Friends Select, that awareness that we are part of a community here, but that we are part of a larger community in the city and in the world. And I think it also has informed how I've been able to kind of lead and create an organization that really didn't exist. We've had a chance to create it from scratch. And so the choices that we've been able to make along the way about how we engage with each other, how we communicate with each other, what our culture is like, how we respect each other, how we invite people to be a part of the process of, creating what we do and where we're going, I think is very much grounded in, how I learned as a young person to just interact with classmates, with teachers, with parents, with the whole community, staff, everyone associated with this community. There was that element of humanity that I think we all were just, without necessarily talking about it in that way, we were sort of infused with it, and that is just very present for me as as I kind of move through my responsibilities at work, and hopefully that's something that we then sort of reflect out in the work that we do. So yeah, a lot more to say about my years here and how much they've influenced me, but grateful to be back and have a chance to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Rachel Zimmerman. I am class of 85, and my daughter is going to start here in the fall, and she'll be class of 2026, right? So anyway, so this is exciting because she's getting to know the school, and I have my two best friends from high school in the audience, who one came down from Boston and one came up from DC, so I feel very privileged today. I run an organization called In Liquid. It's a visual arts organization. We're a nonprofit. We're going 24 years, which is shocking to me. And my kids joke sometimes, who do I love more, In Liquid or my kids? And I said, it all depends on the day. Sometimes In Liquid's nicer, and sometimes my kids are. But running an arts nonprofit is not for the, you have to be fearless, candidly. Running a nonprofit's hard to begin with. Running one that's arts related is even harder, and it's a challenge. And I have to say that I think, I said this earlier, that, one of the things that I find interesting about Friends Select, and I've had a lot of time to think about Friends Select, far more than I have in a long time, because we had to do the whole application process for my daughter and figure out if it was like a fit, and is that it allows you to be a unique individual. Like, it gives you the opportunity to find yourself and to believe in yourself. And because the school's small, I realized that my friends, we all had very, very different experiences here. And we sort of made it our own. And in talking about, our time, I don't remember half the people that Jill remembers or Kristen remembers, and because we had our own path. But in talking to Norman the other day, who I guess is the dean of upper school, he was saying to Sasha, start a club, do what you want. And we did. We started a club in senior year. It didn't last very long, but we did because we felt it was important. But when, I was a frustrated artist living in Philadelphia after having moved to Philadelphia from New York, which is where you're supposed to be an artist, I realized that if I didn't like the way art was in Philadelphia, I had to change it. And I had to make it different, and I had to make it better, And no one was going to do that unless we did it. And I have to say that that's one of the beautiful things about Friends Select, was it gave me the courage to do that and to realize that I could make a difference, and that it's important to make a mark and to do something that is beyond yourself, and that is not just your interest, but something that is for the greater good and the greater community. And that's a very important philosophy, I think, as far as Quakerism, but just, the fact that, life is short, and you've got to really do something that's impactful and meaningful. And, and everyone has different strengths. So I think the idea that, it may have been my idea, but it's totally a collaborative project. You know what I mean? And we're only as good as the sum of our parts. And you realize that over time, that the more that you could sort of brighten other people's lives and the more that you can touch other people, the greater it is for the whole community. And especially for art, because in this city in particular, we don't have a holistic vision for how art is in the city. I sit on the board of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. I was on the board of the Philadelphia Cultural Fund. And we take it for granted that this is a great art city. We have great institutions, we have art schools, but we forget about the artists a lot of the time. And so 24 years ago, it's like, let's remember them. Because if you want to be a great global city and you want your institutions to be reflective of your communities and the people who are living within your neighborhoods, you got to support the artists who live here. So, but it's a process, and it is a collaboration.
Okay, so this next question, any of you can answer, but are there any unique partnerships that maybe didn't go as planned, whether how they're created or what they've produced or how effective they became?
So I guess I'd be the first to answer that. When the Sing Center was first established, we had put out a call put a proposal in for the NSF, and to join this what we're now known as the National Nanotechnology Coordinated Infrastructure. And part of this strategic plan that we had was to join with the Community College of Philadelphia to create a nanotechnicians certification program. And this was at a time 8 years ago when we're all asking the question, what problem are we actually solving? We're creating a program out of thin air. And lo and behold, after going through some discovery and everything else, and then the pandemic hit, we were able to launch this internship program right after the pandemic and found that it's more than just trying to create technicians. It was really just trying to give exposure. It was taking it one level back. There are some students out there and there's different kinds of students, right? When I'm talking from a higher ed perspective, at the 4-year degree program, you got the student that's going there, getting the degree, and they're going to launch themselves into a career. They're going to move wherever they want. You got the other student at the community college associate's degree level, even vocational institutions, that are going to school to better themselves because, one, they have a family, they're raising a kid, they're taking care of their elderly at home, right? They have a job, right? And if you look at the U.S. Department of Education and the statistics, those individuals think they're going to get through there in 2 years, where it takes them 3.5 on average, right? And I think that one was a really telling story of how to, one, it's important to align yourselves, right? Have some common goal in mind, but be very flexible to what your ultimate goal could be, right? We had a milestone. We wanted to create a technicians program, but really the second part came in. This is, wait, these students are using this as a springboard to launch themselves into a 4-year degree if this is the direction they want to go into. And 2 of them did, the other one went into another direction, which is totally fine. We wanted that to happen. And now we're sitting in an era of the CHIPS and Science Act where now this program is really relevant. So that's my example of what I have.
So for Chinatown, my nonprofit, Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, like the school here, we have a plan for Chinatown. It's what we call our neighborhood plan. It's a plan when you develop, it's probably a 10 to 20 year plan. It's a vision. And when we go about creating these plans, first and foremost, it's important for us to engage the members of the neighborhood, our community, because the plan and the vision has to reflect the people who work and live in the Chinatown community. Otherwise, it's a plan that's not for everybody. Once we get to that point, we've identified goals that we want to achieve in the first 5 years. And these plans are very aggressive. And I think Mark Gary can attest to the transformation plan. It tries to achieve many different goals, but we can't do everything at one time. There's one particular goal that we want to achieve for Chinatown, and that's to bring in funding resources to develop programming for our youth so they could be more competitive, and we can bring equity when it comes to youth progressing to through elementary to middle school and to high school, whether they're attending school in the community or attending public schools. And in the Philadelphia district, there's magnet schools, and so if our children from our community want to be competitive and enter into the magnet schools, we have to help them develop their skills so they can be competitive. So we identified a coalition of institutions in Chinatown that were involved in education from preschool on up. And we worked very hard to bring the funding in. We're not the experts, so we're relying on these institutions to build the capacity of our children in Chinatown. One particular coalition member wasn't adhering to the requirements of the grant funding. You know, we get grant funding, you know, you're from Penn, you understand that they have a lot of requirements. You do too as well. And it requires reporting and metrics. So one of the members weren't performing as expected. And it was a really difficult decision for us. We thought that preserving the funding, ensuring that all the kids had an opportunity to build their skill sets was more important than trying to preserve a member's relationship as the overall strategy. So it was a very difficult decision to make. And it was very hard because the relationships were personal with this organization, but we made this decision to cut the ties out with this organization to preserve this program. And I'm happy to say that 15 years later, this program is very strong. We have some of the same members in this coalition, but at the end of the day, our focus is really on the youth and helping them. So.
I can speak quickly, I guess, to our experience with some strategic partnerships, and I think, John, as you alluded to, for me, it all sort of starts with your own organization's strategic plan, and that process has been extremely important to us and valuable to us to make sure that we really are clear about our own roadmap and what are the greatest priorities to make sure that our organization is healthy, that we know, what types of programs are most needed and where we need to, build strength in those programs so that we can be the most effective that we can be and measure our impact and measure our progress toward achieving our mission. And then strategic partnerships are the natural sort of offshoots of that, I guess, to really determine, who are the organizations and the counterparts, both in where we're concerned in animal welfare, and I think that's where our initial sort of set of strategic partners naturally reside. But over the years, it's being open to really understanding where are the other opportunities and where are the other organizations in the community that have a shared interest but may be coming at a set of challenges in the community from a different perspective or with a different mission, and really being open to those opportunities and then being ready to invest the time that it takes to build those relationships, build trust, build a shared understanding of how are we going to work together. And I think, when I reflect on the challenges that can come up, often it has to do with changing. It can be changing leadership. It can be changes that are internal to the other organization that might kind of create a bump in the road for them that makes it harder to continue to engage in the same way. And really just, I think, and certainly with the pandemic, we all experienced just major changes in how we needed to operate, what we needed to focus on just to sort of survive and take care of our staff and continue to fulfill our mission in the best way that we could during those difficult times. So it's, I think, just creating that give and take and making sure that those lines of communication are open, that there is trust there in that relationship, so that as both organizations are going through whatever changes they may be going through, that there is a way to sort of preserve, endure what the partnership can at that moment, and then hopefully kind of circle back to the original plan, or coming together and figuring out, okay, the plan needs to change because circumstances have changed or forces in the community have changed that we need to react to. So I think it's that sort of flexibility that needs to be built in that we've learned from experience.
So, I mean, it's a loaded question, in a lot of ways. I think, having clarity, I think, is a really important thing, but I think, we've partnered with probably every arts organization in the city at one point or another. Some great collaborations, some terrible. And I think, the idea is you need to know your bandwidth and what you can do and what you're bringing to the table, and there has to be clarity of what expectations are and who's doing the work. And I think, we will always come through and do what needs to do what we have to do, because that is just our ethos. That's how we operate. You cannot do anything without integrity. It will get back. And, Philadelphia is like a half a degree of separation between everyone, so everyone talks, right? So you can't not do something right. But not everyone thinks that way, and, there are organizations that have higher profiles tend to take the lion's share of the credit, whether you like it or not. And there are other organizations, as a small organization, sometimes you get swallowed up. So I think, we always do a MOU for everything we work on at this point, because we burned, you know what I mean? And end up doing a lot more work than we probably should have. And, it costs us a lot, I mean, time, energy, money, whatever. So now before we do anything, we make sure that we're incredibly clear and very intentional about what we're doing, what our role is, who we are, and what. And I'm also very quick to rip off the Band-Aid if it's not working anymore, which I think is really important to be. And then we're always reflective. Like, you know what I mean? You always have to look back, you know what I mean, and see what works and what doesn't. And, it's a hard process because, something could sound really great, and then it could just be like so terrible, it's just not worth it. But and I think in the arts it's very different, because one of the things you would think that we all have enough bandwidth to be able to be like, sure, we can do this with each other, but we're all working in this sort of, like, all of our steps are really small, you know what I mean? So like we're always in sort of pitted against each other when it comes to funders or when it's coming to audiences or something. And I'm sure it's like that with animals. I can only imagine. So, it really doesn't, give a lot of support to work collaboratively as much as you'd like to. And I think, the funders are finally realizing, wow, we've made you all enemies of each other, because, it's always of, instead of there being, the idea of abundance, it's always the idea of lack, and I think we really need to change how we think about that. And, there's some really good collaborations happening right now, but I wasn't involved, but I know that it was an incredibly painful process. And if you get a chance, for those who are in Philadelphia, if you see the Rising Sun show it's AMP and at PAPA, and granted, the whole thing started during COVID, and, and but one curator is still has their job because they all moved on over the past couple years. But it's an incredibly big, ambitious project. It's 20 artists making site-specific work for 2 museums. You know what I mean? And it's impressive. But not being involved in it and being, the fly in the room and hearing conversations about it, it was crazy. You know what I mean? But, they had funders behind it, but this is sort of, like, we need to breed more of that stuff, because it's really important for us as arts organizations to, like, use our audience to share the wealth instead of, like, disperse the wealth. We shouldn't be cannibalizing ourselves, and I think in a lot of ways that happens, even with the best intentions.
Thank you. We have one more general question, and then we'll have personalized questions. This one is a bit speculative. Are there any unique partnerships that maybe, if time, money, and logistics weren't an issue, so if you could wave a magic wand and create the perfect strategic partnership, what would your dream be and why? Open to anyone.
So I'll go first. So I mentioned earlier the CHIPS and Science Act. The gap it's trying to close is a 30-year gap of offshoring chip manufacturing. Does anyone know what the real problem is of bringing chip manufacturing home to the U.S. is, by any chance? Labor. Now, this is just the foundries, the chip manufacturing sites alone. They need about 250,000 people to come and fill those sites. Now, remember what I just said about the type of student, or two types of students that we have to deal with, okay? Now let's talk about the supply chain. How many total jobs do you think we need there? That's about 1 million total, including the 250,000. It's a lot, right? So when you think of chip manufacturing, you're thinking about, oh, let's just talk about the West Coast and Silicon Valley and everything else. Well, you can do that all you want, but the Mid-Atlantic represents about 60 million residents. That's 20% of the US population, which is a big lion's share when you also consider the amount of intellectual powerhouses that sit in this region alone. So if we talk about like strategic partnerships, I'm thinking at the national level. I'm thinking about, obviously the US government's already putting in the seed. I'd love to have governors at the table, which we already have Shapiro knocking on our door. I've got, Carnegie Mellon, obviously UPenn, and Penn State were the trifecta organizing this among the other universities that are throughout the Mid-Atlantic, and then paired up with a third sector. So we got government, got academia, and now we've got industry. And in that component, what I think is very important is that everyone recognizes their role, right? And everyone kind of enunciates and elucidates what the expectations of their counterparts' roles will be. So through the government, let's start at the state level, there's an expectation that they have to help us lift up the educational programs and the expectations and provide the incentives. From the research level and the academic level, obviously the faculty want to leverage that for their research, but we also have to look at expanding programs there to meet and serve the underserved populations. When you're talking about that, you need to talk to industry. And you need to lower or tear down the ivory towers, really. And think about, what does it mean to be an operator versus what does it mean to be an engineer versus what it means to be a manager and what it is to be an executive, right? And I think that's where, for me, if I could wave a magic wand, right, we'd recreate and re-synergize our education system and re-synergize the expectations in corporate America in the private sector. And obviously provide and get some support from the state level. So, and that's just my idea.
Thanks for the question. I'm going to try to tie it up a little bit of my previous comments. So if we have a shared goal and strategic partner, shared goal, and shared common values and shared visions, I think, all the participants have touched upon these things. When we have this, we have the possibility for a strong and successful strategic partnership. And for me, I would love to have an NBA caliber basketball arena built next to Chinatown. Just kidding. It got pretty quiet. All right, got pretty quiet. Now, that's unnecessary, right? That's sort of, when you have resources, you have money, you have people, you have connections. That's what you dream about for a vision. Where we work in the nonprofit world, it's much simpler, right? In the city of Philadelphia, I hate it when the reality is we're the poorest big city. We hear that too often. And we hear elected officials talk about it. We hear the news media talk about it. But we don't see enough activity or problem solving. We hear these and read about these one-off projects. And I think this is a total failure of this system that we live and work in. So the strategic partnership vision that I'm seeing, and I've been inspired by Michael Gary when he first arrived as the head of school, and I'm sure you remember this, is that we talked about this. Imagine filling up the stadium with African American community males, and striving for one vision to bring people up in the city. So what I've started out as a pilot program called the Black and Gold 2.0. And Black and Gold started within a small group of city employees that wanted to bring African American, Asian American folks together, starting with city employees and bringing it out to communities. So they had a very successful 2022 Black and Gold program where we probably had 50 to 60 people come together over meetings, over food. And the facilitators did a great job of getting many people didn't know, we didn't know one another, getting us comfortable, breaking down some stereotypes and having real honest conversations. The 2.0 that I'm working on is bringing youth, African American and Asian American youth together, because we see this divide, we see these barriers, and youth in schools, public schools, are experiencing conflict every day. And the idea is, what if we brought youth together to learn about Asian American history, African American history, and the youth will realize that there's more that we have in common about struggles, and why are we having conflict with one another. So that's the goal, and I've reached out to organizations in the Asian American community and African American community to sort of build this pilot up, and if it works, I'd love to see this expand.
I'm used to being last. My last name is Zimmerman, so.
I think, what's on my mind these days about if, resources were not the obstacle, if, particularly, I think stemming from our experience during the pandemic, and which really challenged us and created opportunities for us to create relationships with human service, social service organizations that I think what has become very clear to me and to, I think, many of us in the kind of social service world is that, each individual organization is, none of us have the resources we need. Most people, employed are doing the jobs of multiple people. We rely on volunteers, where, funding is tight. All of these things that just makes accomplishing and feeling like, we're kind of meeting the need that we exist to meet difficult on a daily basis. But when we connect with organizations whose missions might be completely different, we start to realize, how many intersections there are and how many opportunities there are to actually support each other and to support the community in a more robust way, if we all had an ability to be in greater contact with each other, to know each other better, to know each other's resources better, so that, for example, when we meet a pet owner who's coming to us because they're having a hard time keeping their pet, they're having a hard time feeding them or providing for their medical issues, or they're going through a difficult time in their life and they need support from us, that in their mind they're coming to us for support about their pet. What we learn is that they're having housing issues. They might be losing their housing. They're having trouble feeding their human family members. They have medical issues or mental health issues of their own. And so if I could wave that magic wand, there would be a richer network and a more ability within all of our organizations to be able to sort of know and connect with our counterparts in other areas, so that one person can get the services and then the referrals and the opportunities that they need. The resources are here. There are so many organizations doing so much good work in Philadelphia, and I think we all feel just hampered by what we're up against on a daily basis to be able to really benefit and serve each other in a more robust way that then would, have really, I think, incredible effects on the community. I think a lot of people just don't know where to turn for help, and it's not until you start to get to know them and sort of pull things out of them that you understand, oh, I wish I just knew who to call, who could help them with this other issue that would relieve so much stress. And if we had that network ability, I think it would be of just tremendous value to the community in general.
I have so many answers to this question, but I'm going to pick one, which is, we have a mayoral's race, and so I sit on GPCA Sport, and we've come up with a policy paper for arts and culture in the city. And when Nutter was elected, he reinstated the Office of Arts and Culture and Creative Economy, but it's just an office, and it doesn't have any power. And it was supposed to be a department, and it was also supposed to be a cabinet level position, which is still not. And it needs a charter change, which I still don't understand. Either I'm really dumb or I'm missing something, why this charter change is so difficult. But nevertheless, and if you listen to any of the mayoral candidates, they sort of half kind of get it, and they sort of half kind of don't get it still, even though there's all the minds in the city have put something together that's written out, and they just need to follow it. But I think if there was really a Department of Arts and Culture in the city that was really meaningful and had real money behind it to really educate the importance of arts and culture in the city on a really holistic, systemic level, our lives would be a lot easier and better. There's a lot of development happening. What Sparks is Therapeutics is doing a $557 million building on 31st and Chestnut. But if there was a department where actually, like those plans had an art plan from the very beginning, before they broke ground, to do something really meaningful and impactful, that would be huge for the city. What happens is that, art is always thought about after the fact, like after they've poured the concrete, after they put up drywall, after they put the lighting in. And maybe they'll think about putting something in, but then you have to sort of retrofit it and sort of put it in, and it's not like a holistic thing. So, so I think, the fact is that we have artists who are leaving the city in droves because they can't afford to live here, because the standard of living is fairly low for the people who live here, but for all the people who've moved during the pandemic or prior to that, make better salaries working remotely in California or New York. So we have to increase, like our standard of living. It's gotten very expensive to live in Philadelphia. And so a lot of the artists that I work with now live in Baltimore because it's more affordable. They commute here and teach. And their work, is not made to live in, on a shelf. It needs to live somewhere. And so we really need to figure out ways of taking these developments and projects and all the stuff that's happening that, and really, put the discussion of like how they fit within our community in a meaningful way. Right now, like when I started in Liquid, like everyone's like, why do you want to work with Philadelphia artists? I'm like, I don't know, I happen to be one. Being an artist, you sort of know what you need to do, and everyone's always shocked when I say that I am. I'm like, well, who would be stupid enough to do this? But, but honestly, at a certain point, like, all of a sudden it's become really cool to like now the museum's doing something, now Penn's finally doing something. But there's still not that plan. And I think, if we could actually, have the city embrace it in a meaningful way and really talk to these developers who are coming from like either locally or from Texas or from Boston or from DC, and really educate them about the need of supporting the community around them, I think that would go a long way.
Thank you for all of your responses. We're going to move on to more individualized questions now. I have one for Mr. Chin, and I'd like to preface with saying I like Chinatown. I like going there. They have really good food. So thank you for the work that you do. It's a nice place. And my question is, how do you like work and partner with the greater Philadelphia community to develop and to grow Chinatown, while also trying to maintain its historic aspect, and also adding on like how has the proposed arena impacted what you want to do?
Okay, did you come up with that tough question?
I did.
Okay, all right. Great job, folks. Yeah, so, you know, Chinatowns have been experiencing challenges for at least 2 decades now. 1966 was really the burgeoning of Chinatowns. They've existed for over, so Philadelphia's Chinatown, 1870, right? We've been here a long time. But after the immigration regulations and federal level change, we saw waves of Chinese get how to preserve these Chinatowns, because Chinatowns are a really meaningful place. Not only is it a place where mostly Chinese live, and you can get great food services and great shopping, but they're hubs of Asian American culture. Just looking at the 76ers arena controversy, you can see all these folks, not just Asian Americans, but there's a strong connection to Chinatowns because they're a hub of culture, and there's a connection. Even if you don't live in Chinatown, if you're Asian American, you feel connected because once you enter Chinatown, you become the majority, right? Everyone looks like you. You share the same culture and food. And if you're Chinese, you speak the same language. Outside Chinatown, we're a minority, right? So there's a really important psychological connection and cultural connection that Chinatown offers. So we are struggling after the pandemic. Like many of the small businesses, Chinatown is pretty much a commercial corridor. We have about 300 businesses in Chinatown, and we are a really important economic engine that supports jobs for non-English speaking people. Because if you're an immigrant, you don't speak English or you don't speak it well, it's very difficult for you to get a job in mainstream Philadelphia. So we have a really important economy. So how do we need economics, we need people with cultural preservation expertise, and we also need planners like we are to figure out how do we bring people in a room together to figure out the balance, because without strong economic growth and development, Chinatown can't survive. At the same time, when is there too much development that distinguishes the unique cultural identity of Chinatown? We have some answers, I think, but it's not large developments like Arena that has a $1.3 billion impact, right? But what amount of that money is going to contribute to the preservation of Chinatown? We don't know. We think it's creating harm, and if they're going to give us, they propose to give Chinatown and the immediate neighborhoods $50 million. Is that $50 million for mitigation, or is it $50 million to benefit the community so we can preserve it? If it's mitigation, it's not going to work. If there's $50 million in benefits, well, we're willing to listen to see how that $50 million is going to benefit Chinatown, if it means that we can preserve Chinatown. But, you know, there's also outside forces that we're dealing with, is that the Asian population is more spread out than it has ever been in the Philadelphia region. You can find stores, food markets in the suburban areas in Northeast Philadelphia, South Philadelphia. So people don't have to come to Chinatown to be a consumer, right? So we're challenged with that aspect of it. But people have to come to Chinatown to have this cultural connection and strong identity as an Asian American. We're trying to figure out how to preserve, but we can't preserve it with this economic engine if it goes away from Chinatown.
We have one more prepared question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. This is for Ms. Zimmerman. Is there anything that, in your opinion, sets apart the Philly art scene and particularly compared to other cities?
I think Philly is
how do I put this? It's taking them in some ways because it's very small. I mean, a lot of organizations know each other, which makes it difficult to do. So very helpful operating just. So I think that in that sense, it makes it a little bit interesting that if you have a good idea, or people are very supportive, but also tell you you're crazy. You know, so it's that side of things. He said, this is camaraderie. I mean, listen, I had an idea, and started this total experiment, have to little steps, and it was very easy to become, the board to the Arts Association, and then evolved to going into the fund, and so you can do a lot to make an impact. It's really great. The difference is like, it's huge, and it's this way. There's a lot more access, but there's a lot more support in some ways because art's economic drive there. Even though it's a huge economic driver, it's over 100 meter. But that's that's anything that's art related, but it's a huge economic driver. It's not recognized in the same way. So like our budget for the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, I think it was 0 pandemic. And it was back to 1. I think last year it was the size ever been, which was only 5 to 1, trying to sustain that, but for 115, the reverse. So we have a long way to overseas. And I thought our town places right here in East Tower. When they it's developed September, they probably rebranded the same district residence. And so they invested in $1.2 million of work they actually bought. It was sold office. And we really lobbied to do this installation in 3 months. It's still a budget, which is huge because how they use PR, so they got people, residents to live. So that is a challenge, but show artwork can't show anywhere else. And we work that, think of that. It's not a problem. It's like giving artists for use space, and the top is great. People see. But when my boss on the padding to Dutch 2013, she understood why we have a credit to art and culture, or why most artists didn't actually support art and culture. And she said, we're a big when they said this program. She wanted to fight out the $2 million budget they had to Philadelphia for time to see like moving. And they said, no, like, who's to do that? It's easy to me. But that's it. And their money was such a short coming from the base, but then Philadelphia, and what they wanted isn't here anymore. Because they moved on. There's two people become stakeholder in our say, look, there's practice. Like, it'll be good about talking about what's wrong with Philadelphia, but at the same time, we need to make Islam fix. Denver's a good job. They have different problems, but maybe we do that. So, yeah, I think but I also talked about my who thought that the Philadelphia are so much better than New York. So I think we're all trying to get different colleges.
Shall we open up questions?
Steve, that's it. Really wasn't a point that you guys didn't even touch work I do. I would really say developers and doing a large project over by here. You made a great point. These developers can't these one-off projects. We got problems in these areas. What are you doing? So one thing going to be one more protect and around development to get this which of course it kind of raises yourself in there. But just looking at ways to opportunities when we bring the manufacturing diabetic tech and we're going to be returning on already certified manufacturing. But outside the box, from this point, I started today to figure out all the names in the end, and because I don't know what they're doing, it's a full-time person trying to figure out the hierarchy from different entities. Which really really been some issue because I can folks watch this job with the hard to say there's a point in